We have a lot of wonderful people who are here tonight and a lot of the groups who are here tonight. And it was with great joy that a couple of years ago, the ACLU was given the honor and the privilege to sponsor the book Courting Equality, along with Wayne Wright Bank and Karen Rudolph and Jimmy Simmons. And tonight, it's our honor to join together with a larger group of people and of organizations that are making not only tonight happen, but really making this movement for equality happen. And that includes the Center for New Words, Beacon Press, of course, GLAAD, Mass Equality, PFLAG, the Religious Coalition for the Freedom to Marry, the Mass Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, the Freedom to Marry Coalition of Massachusetts, the History Project, documenting LGBT Boston, and of course, our media sponsors, Bay Windows. So thank you to all of the co-sponsors of tonight's event. We also tonight are joined by a number of elected officials who have been really important. And these are the people who've had the real courage to dare, the courage to stand for principle throughout the last 2 years of this battle. And we're going to be hearing from some of them tonight, but I'll also be introducing people along the way. Tonight we have Representative Alice Wolf with us. Thank you, Alice. A little later tonight, we'll also be hearing from Senator Jarrett Barrios. Jarrett. We'll also be hearing from Representative Byron Rushing. Byron. And from the Cambridge City Council, Denise Simmons is here with us tonight. Denise. This book, this incredibly important book of history and photographs, one of the most well-written books, by the way, of the history of the equality movement here in Massachusetts, tells through both words and incredibly sensitive photographs about the political struggle and the battle that we've been waging here in Massachusetts and will continue to wage. But more importantly, it is a book about humanity. It is the book that documents with incredible sensitivity the individuals and the families that are really, whose lives are on the line here. And it reminds us that this ultimately is not just a political battle. It's really a battle for the most fundamental of human rights and of human dignity. And in such, it's a book truly about love and about all of us. The famous French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson once said that photographs can reach eternity through the moment. And what this book has done for us, what the words of Pat Gazemba and Karen Kahn and the beautiful photographs that Marilyn Humphreys have given us through this book tell us. Thank you, yeah. You know, Marilyn loves the spotlight. But if it's true that photographs can reach eternity through the moment, what Marilyn and Pat and Karen have done for us tonight is to really document that moment for all eternity. It is my pleasure to introduce Representative Alice Wolf.
Good evening. It is my high privilege to have the honor of welcoming you to the city of Cambridge this evening on this very, very important anniversary and on the day where at least I, for the first time, have seen this wonderful, wonderful book. I haven't had a chance to totally internalize it, but this wonderful book that really will I know documents in picture and in words a journey that has taken a very long time, that is continuing and that will continue for the future. And I am honored to be here also because some of my most favorite people in the world are in this room in many different roles, and I decided I better not specify who and what because I will be in trouble. But colleagues and friends and people who have worked with me on political campaigns and in many different ways. So I am just thrilled to be able to welcome you. I want to say that, as you well know, this struggle is continuing, and we at the State House are continuing on the struggle with you and with our colleagues. And I just want to, for a moment, as you see the progress in this book, I also want to reflect on the progress even in the political sphere. That may not be as important as the heart sphere, and it may not be as important as the love sphere, but it is important for the future, and you all know that. So what I want to point out to you is in a very short period of time, in very few years that we can count on one hand, we have made enormous progress in the marriage battle. And just to make it specific, I looked up today what our numbers were on the very first vote that we took in the legislature in 1974, and what the votes were in the very last vote that we have taken in January of this year. And then we can reflect a little. I won't reflect very much on the future, but just to remind you that as recently as in 2004, there were 70 House members and 30 senators who voted with us on this issue. It was a different issue, but I mean, it was a different bill than we have before us right now, but that was 70 and 30. That still, I think I can still do this math, and that is 100 votes. In January, there were 102 House members and 32 senators that voted with us on the substance of this matter, which was 134 votes, and one of our votes was missing that day. And as you know, since that time, we have had freshmen come in, and we have gained votes since that time as well. So that is in the history of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that is a very short time to have made enormous, enormous gains. And I go back. As some of you know, in this city of the city of Cambridge, I go back a lot further than that, when even in the Cambridge City Council, votes were 5-4 on this issue several times. So we have made enormous gains. We hope those gains will be permanent and that we will make them permanent. And that is what we all, the elected officials in this room and elsewhere, are working on. So I want to congratulate the authors, the photographer, the sponsors of this wonderful book, and I hope there may, in some time in the future, be another book that will catalog where we go from here. But we have had 3 great years, and we're going to keep moving forward with that. Welcome to Cambridge. Come, and for those of you who do not live here, come and see us often. And I also want to tell you 2 of my colleagues, Representative Kaufman and Representative L'Italien, wanted specifically for me to tell you that they are sorry they could not be here with you today, but they are thinking of all of you and all of the people who are concerned about fairness, equality, and love in our Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Tom Halleck of Beacon Press. Tom?
I love the feeling of this room. It's not the room we started off thinking we were going to be in, but it does remind me a little bit of Nurses Hall, the feeling of being surrounded by people. So no change of venue or rain is going to keep people from getting together to celebrate this. What I want to say is that we are honored to be your publishers, and that this book is a labor of love for Beacon Press, its staff, and its parent organization, the Unitarian Universalist Association, too. You know, Beacon is right up on Beacon Hill there, where we can kind of keep an eye on things at the State House. And when the emails would go out that we needed some more bodies in Nurses Hall or in front of the Con convention, the building would just empty right out. So we feel like we've been part of the story all along, too. Our director, Helen Atwan, was supposed to be here tonight but couldn't make it, and she did ask me to say a few things on her behalf. First is that publishing this book is a point of real pride for Beacon Press and its staff. Courting Equality represents all the struggle, the conflict, the tremendous effort and commitment that went into the marriage equality movement, but above all, it vividly represents the joy and triumph of the effort. We want to thank Marilyn Humphreys, whose gorgeous and dramatic photographs are a gift to all of us. Karen Kahn and Pat Gazemba, who worked so hard and so effectively on the fine text and on making this book a reality. I'd also like to thank a few people at Beacon Press, Brian Halley, who was a devoted and inspired editor, and P.J. Tierney, who oversaw the complex production of the book with such care. We believe that this book is more than a documentation, more than a celebration. We believe it's a blueprint for the rest of the nation to follow in Massachusetts' footsteps. Everyone in this room has played a part in making our success in Massachusetts. We hope this book can be a part of making marriage legal for all couples throughout the United States. On behalf of everyone at Beacon Press, thank you.
Well, her title is Civil Rights Project Director for GLAAD. But to us, we can just call her an inspiration. Please welcome Mary Buonato.
This is really great. It's great to be in Massachusetts. And you all look great. And this really is a great night because this is a fabulous book and it's a great testament to the work of everybody here because everybody owns a piece of this. I'm here tonight in part because I really want to thank Marilyn for her devotion and dedication over so many years, including marriage, but not just limited to marriage, where she's been out in all kinds of weather, lugging around all kinds of equipment at all hours of the day and night, and she's always there. So thank you, Marilyn. And so, of course, unsurprisingly, she's done a fabulous job with the photos on the marriage equality piece as well. So that's what we all get to enjoy tonight. And of course, this book, Courting Equality, really captures an historical moment, measured not in a moment, but in years. And it's brought to life not just by the photos, but also by the, I think, very keen narrative and the analytical text that Pat and Karen have put together. So thank you for that. And in my view, fittingly, the book is dedicated to the 7 couples who were the plaintiff couples in the Goodridge case, the 7 couples who decided to take some risks, went to their city or town halls, and did something that people do every day and take for granted as one of their rights, which is they went to their town halls and they asked for a marriage license. And of course, they were denied, and that is what began this process. These 7 couples, 4 of whom I believe, I think I've seen 4 of them here tonight, Dave and Rob, Ed and Mike, Maureen and Ellen, and Linda and Gloria, they have always been the heart and soul of what became the Goodridge case. And their dedication and commitment to one another, their love for one another, was so clear and so obvious that it became a point of connection for gay and non-gay people alike. It put a human face on an issue that people found uncomfortable at a minimum or uninteresting at another. And it was by putting that human face on and making that human connection that we were able to move forward, change hearts, and change minds. And in the end, that always is the foundation of our progress. We have to change hearts and minds. So thank you, all of you, many of whom are right over there and over here. Thank you. Put up your hand. Put up your hand. Put up your hand. Come on, put up your hand. They're being shy. Now, this whole debate changed irrevocably on November 18th, 2003, when a state high court, for the first time in the history of our country, used these words to describe the situation for gay people. The Massachusetts Constitution affirms the dignity and equality of all individuals. It forbids the creation of second-class citizens, and therefore they go on to say, the Commonwealth has failed to identify any constitutionally adequate reason for denying marriage to same-sex couples. That changed everything. And in vindicating the rights of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, the Commonwealth could never really go back. And in the following 6 months, as you know, things were a bit eventful around here. Constitutional conventions, lawsuits to block the implementation of Goodridge, and so on. But what happened in that time period? What happened was that not only gay people came forward, but non-gay people came forward to fight passionately to preserve what we had won. And it was, again, no minority can ever succeed without the support of the majority, and that was the tipping point, and that is what Mass Equality and so many allied organizations and so many people coming forward have accomplished, that we are now a movement that combines not just the minority, but also large elements of the majority, and that's how we're going to keep this thing. Now, fighting, in my view, the whole thing about fighting for equality, part of what I think is really a model about what Massachusetts has done is that it's partly holding signs, it's partly doing all the things that everybody has done, but in the end, we have to listen to what the concerns are of the people who are not there. We have to address those concerns, and we have to help people to understand that you can't be for equality and not be for marriage. You can't be for equality and yet acquiesce in gay people's exclusion from the most central civil institution in our society. And that's the battle that we've been waging and largely winning here so far. Now, where do we go from here nationally? I think where we're going nationally, you heard it here first. Nationally, we're going to marriage. The rest of the country is going to catch up to where Massachusetts is now, as long as there is that same type of engagement that so many of us here have done and so many of you have done, of listening, working, addressing concerns. And I want to say one thing about Massachusetts. I know you're going to hear from legislators, and you've just heard from Alice. You know, you all know we're one vote away from putting the rights of gay people on the ballot. This is the biggest prize in the whole wide world the right wing has ever had, is pulling marriage equality out of the ground in Massachusetts. And it would not be a good thing. And I want to say this. I have heard now from elected officials who say they're going to have our vote. We're going to have their vote, excuse me. We're going to have their vote when they're in the ballot box. Well, I say this to anybody who's taken an oath to uphold the Massachusetts Constitution. Your oath to uphold the Massachusetts Constitution means you have to do everything possible to protect the equal protection rights of gay people and make sure this measure is not on the ballot by any means necessary. Thank you. But tonight, I don't want to dwell on the bad, and as you know, we are certainly living in very interesting times, and it's interesting to live through a civil rights movement. You're married in one state, you're not in the next. The federal government says you're not married when you're filling out your taxes, so it's all a little bit confusing. It's going to work out over time. But rather than dwell on the negative, I want to just say there are now 10 states that have some sort of statewide relationship recognition. We're at the top of the heap, obviously, with marriage here in Massachusetts. But bear in mind that people from Rhode Island are coming to Massachusetts to marry, and the Rhode Island legislature has not had a heart attack about it. There's a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing tonight, actually, probably going on right now. And, you know, it's not expected that any kind of anti-marriage limitation is going to succeed there. So that state of affairs should continue. There are 6 states that have civil unions or civil unions by the name of domestic partnership: California, Connecticut, Vermont, New Jersey, and soon Oregon and New Hampshire. Now, again, I'm not going to be one to say civil unions are as good as marriage, as you well know, because, it's great to protect people to some degree with state rights, but, from our perspective, there's a reason why we don't have separate laws and institutions just for minority groups, and it's a lesson we've learned in this country, and it's not a mistake we should now remake and impose on gay people. But anyway, there's another 3 states, Hawaii, Maine, and Washington, that also have some sort of statewide registry or reciprocal beneficiary system. So that's incredible. And I'll tell you something, 10 years ago, in July of 1997, we filed the Vermont case. Not one state at that point had any statewide system. So in 10 years, we have something going in 20% of the states, which is pretty incredible. And I also think it's important to remember that fighting the battle for marriage has the effect many times of lifting other boats. I'll give you the example of Iowa, where Lambda Legal Defense filed a marriage case. People think, why Iowa? Well, it's important to do things in the middle of the country, too. But what happened in Iowa this year? In 1 year, they passed an LGBT non-discrimination law. 1 year, took us 17. And it was supported by D's and R's, and it was presented as a basic fairness issue. And then at least they could say, see, we're not bad people. We're not with you on the marriage thing, but of course discrimination in the workplace is wrong. It changes the whole discussion. And of course we've got to get people there on marriage in Iowa and across this country as well. But that's just a concrete example of changing the discussion. And a little closer to home in Connecticut, as you probably know, GLAAD filed a marriage case in Connecticut at the request of many people, as well as Love Makes a Family, in August of 2004. And I'll tell you right now, people were pretty jazzed about what was happening here in Massachusetts. We filed that case when the legislature reconvened in 2005. In the words of Ann Standback, the head of Love Makes a Family there, the legislature stampeded toward civil unions. Anything, they realized that it was no longer tolerable to let same-sex couples live in this legal void where your relationships are essentially those of legal strangers. And that is remarkable in its own way. And what happened in 2005 is there was a marriage bill before the Judiciary Committee. They stripped it out. They replaced it with civil unions. They passed it to some degree over the objection of the local activists. Well, people have been making a fuss about this, saying, we don't really want to be in a separate status. We think marriage is better protection. This year, the same Judiciary Committee that stripped down a marriage bill to civil unions 2 years ago heard 12 hours of passionate testimony. This is after the legislators had said, we already know about the marriage issue, keep it short, keep it short. 12 hours of passionate testimony, and voted 2-1 in favor of that marriage bill. And it doesn't mean it didn't survive, but that amount of time, that amount of progress really shows that there is a lot of power, I think, in this movement. Now, of course, it just so happened, fortuitously this week, we also had oral argument in the Connecticut Supreme Court on our marriage case. And our plaintiffs have been very clear. Some of them have had civil unions, some of them haven't, but they've been very clear. They want the dignity and respect and all the protections that go along with marriage. And there's been a way in which the two things have worked together quite well. But what I want to say to you, from my perspective, is something that's really astonishing about the Connecticut argument. 7 justices, I did not hear 1 ounce of the ick factor from any of these justices. There were no creepy questions about marrying your sister or about polygamy or anything like that. Most surprisingly to me, the court was very keenly questioning both sides, and my colleague Ben Klein from GLAAD argued the case and did a tremendous job. I'm not sure if it's available on the web, but it's really great watching. They are strongly considering whether or not to designate gay men and lesbians as a suspect class, meaning that laws which distinguish between people based on sexual orientation would be given strict judicial scrutiny. The state has to come up with a compelling reason why something distinguishes based on sexual orientation, and has to be very carefully examined. That's highly unusual, and there's a test for this. So at one point, the justices are quizzing the attorney for the state about that test. And they say to her, well, there's a history of discrimination against gay people, right? And she says, right. And then another justice says, and there's clearly no relationship between sexual orientation and the ability to perform in or contribute to society, right? And she says, right. And, and then he says, and political powerlessness. Are gay people politically powerless? And she says, well, they did pass the civil union law. And then one of the justices says, yeah, if they were politically powerful, don't you think that marriage bill would have passed across the street? Anyway, I liked it. And then to the argument that she made, the state made on behalf, the assistant attorney general, poor thing, had to make on behalf of the state, that, hey, gay people are still free to marry, they just have to marry somebody of the opposite sex. One of the justices said, now this comes up all the time. One of the justices said, is that your argument? So, anyway. So I think there is a lot of room for progress and a lot of reason to be optimistic. I think we can do this as we move forward in Massachusetts and as we move forward nationally. In 2001, I tracked down a bunch of polls today. In 2001, we had 35% support nationally for any kind of relationship recognition. And as of August of 2006, that number was 67%. We've nearly doubled support in that amount of time. So I look at this book as really a testament to what can happen when people are courageous, when they are vulnerable, when they speak the truth, and when all they ask is to be treated equally under law. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mary Bonato. It's wonderful, as always, to hear from you. I'm happy to say that former Attorney General Jim Shannon is here with us tonight. Jim, thanks for being here and for all you do. Okay, Gary and Rich are here too? Oh, yes, other plaintiffs. And by the way, I want to say thank you to all the plaintiffs' families too, one more time, just because it's really important that they're all here and that they continue to show up and be there. And as one of the beautiful pictures, actually all the way back from 1987 said, we won't go away. So thank you all again for being here. And now we're in for a real treat. We're going to get a chance to look at some of these beautiful Marilyn Humphreys photographs on the big screen. Join me in watching this movie produced by Richard Walsh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Dick Walsh for that beautiful movie, and please join me in thanking and celebrating Marilyn Humphreys.
This is a very different position to be in. I know you can all appreciate that. It's too short. Thank you. I'm going to read my speech because I'm not practiced at this kind of exercise of speaking in front of so many people. And you would think after all of these years of hearing so many wonderful speeches, I would have absorbed some of it, but unfortunately I haven't. So I hope you bear with me. It's wonderful to look out and see so many of you that I've known through years of working in the LGBT and progressive community. I have been in the most enviable position of documenting many efforts in our community, and I've always felt it an honor to do so. Mainly, I have hoped that my photos have provided a mirror to the people who have worked so hard to make this world a better place, so they and others can understand visually their impact on the world. I'd also like to acknowledge the critical role small independent press plays in the politics and documentation of our community, and the hard work of my colleagues who put their hearts and souls into telling our stories. I'd like to thank my dear friends and co-authors, Karen and Pat, whose vision and tenacity made this book happen. I believe their writing is brilliant and has made an exceedingly confusing issue accessible in a way I couldn't have imagined. We thank the ACLU, Wainwright Bank, Jimmy Simmons, and Karen Rudolph for their financial support, and Beacon Press for their hard work. Also, thanks to my friend Elise Cherry for her belief in this project, and my deepest thanks to my brother and mother for their unwavering belief in me, my friends Sarah Wunsch and Chris Ernst for always being my home away from home, and finally the love of my life, Catherine, who day in and day out has lent her love, calmness, and intelligence to my often chaotic world. Thank you so much.
You know, this book is so beautiful, but it's also so well written that after I finished reading it, I thought, when is it coming out in paperback so we can get it into all of the schools? It's really an important book and a well-written book and a joy to read, and we owe our gratitude to Pat Gazemba and Karen Kahn for making it so. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Before we say anything, I would like to ask the plaintiffs and Mary Bonato to come up on stage. I want to read the dedication to the book. Mary's already referred to it. And when Karen and Marilyn and I were thinking about to whom should we dedicate this book, there really wasn't any question in our minds that we should dedicate it to the plaintiffs, because they were the ones who put themselves on the line in a remarkable way, stepped into the spotlight, and ended up being under scrutiny for years because of their brave step. And when we got to meet them all as we were writing the book, we were totally blown away by how wonderful they were. We knew some of them already personally, but we didn't know all of them, and all of them were a total delight to meet. So we dedicate the book to the plaintiffs, and we say, you have raised our hopes for justice and equality. May your example inspire our people all across the country to achieve full civil rights. I want to just acknowledge them all personally, Maureen Rodoff and Ellen Wade. Linda Davies and Gloria Bailey. Rob Compton and Dave Wilson. Ed Balmelli and Mike Horgan. Rich Linnell and Gary Chalmers. Thank you so much. I want to talk a little bit, and just a little bit, believe me, about how courting equality came into existence. And start by saying, of course, that it came into existence because of Marilyn Humphrey's amazing collection of photographs. And because Karen and I are friends of Marilyn, we get to see her wonderful photographs all the time. A number of you have said to me tonight, I've known you by name, and you've said, oh, how do you know my name? And I'm like, well, I've looked at your photograph, I've looked at your name, I've thought about you, so yeah, that's how I know you. I know there's MySpace and Facebook and all that, but I've got Marilyn Humphreys. I don't need those other things. So I want to say that Marilyn has been an amazing person, of course, as many people have said tonight, a brilliant photojournalist, always out there working. Mary referred to, of course, Marilyn lugging around those cameras. Sometimes I help her occasionally, like maybe 0.5 of 1% of the time carrying one of those bags. It's unbelievable, all the weight she carries around. It's really pretty incredible. And what she turns out is this unbelievable document of our community. And I remember Mary saying at the press conference on November 18th, 2003, finally we are part of We the People. And I thought, and Marilyn was there to record it all the way. And that's been one of the beautiful things about this. On November 18th, 2003, I became aware of how big the marriage equality movement was because I was sitting at my house doing some work that some people would consider boring, history project work. I was looking at some old gay community news from 1987. That's where my head was. And Marilyn called me up and said, you've got to help me out. And I said, oh, what? And she said, well, something really big happened today. The Goodridge decision came down. And I was, right. And she said, and I forgot my flashcard, my big flashcard. It's over on my desk. Will you go get it? So being the good friend, yes, I got out of my pajamas and went over to her house and picked up the flashcard and, of course, stayed to see the press conference at the Omni Parker Hotel. And I was just stunned. I did not expect to be as moved by what happened as I was. You know, I was sort of like 1987, HIV, AIDS, what was happening in Boston in gay community news. And all of a sudden I zipped up to the future and there I was. And Mary Bonato got up and spoke eloquently and briefly, very briefly, and then she said, I want you to hear from the plaintiffs. And each of the plaintiffs started talking about what the decision meant. And I was brought to tears, and I'm kind of a tough cookie. I don't get brought to tears really easily. And I just was kind of stunned afterwards, during and afterwards, and I thought, wow, this is really an amazing thing. And I convinced people in the History Project that we ought to start documenting this movement instead of living in the 1980s or before, that maybe we ought to start documenting what was happening right under our noses. And of course, we jumped on it, and we did. But that was how I, a person who is a political activist, it's sort of my second calling all the time, running around doing this kind of thing, did it. And I must say that it never, of course, would have happened without Marilyn's photographs. I just want to tell you a little bit about the book. In the introduction to the book, what we do is try to collapse a lot of social and political and legal history into very readable language. And that was our goal. We thought anybody who can read Time magazine, we want to have that person be able to read this book. And that's the way we're going to do it. It's not going to be an overly intellectual book. It's going to be an intellectually honest book. It's going to tell the story as it happened, but it's going to be accessible because we feel that's what we need to do. The opposition speaks in sound bites. We often spend our time giving more elaborate and considered arguments, and I wanted the book to fall someplace between those two. And I hope that as you read it, you'll feel that it does fall somewhere between those two. So in the first chapter, we tell the very exciting story of Mary walking up to the courthouse to get the decision, and Marilyn walking up there with her. And of course, you see the photograph of Mary reading the decision for the first time on the steps of the courthouse. And it was wonderful that Marilyn was there to record it. Every time I look at that picture, I think, oh, I really would have liked to see Thurgood Marshall reading Brown versus the Board of Education, you know? Like, did he have a smile on his face the way Mary did that day? In the second chapter, because we know that history is important, we flash back to 1972 when a little-known politician was elected to the State House, Barney Frank, and he pledged, as he was running for office, that he would file a civil rights bill. And he did file the civil rights bill, and it took until 1989, that wonderful picture in which you see Arlene Isaacson, of course, giving the love symbol sign, and you see Attorney General Shannon in the background in that picture, and numbers of others of folks here in that picture, which was 1989. It took 17 years to get that civil rights bill passed, but through dogged determination and the commitment of lots of folks in this room, it actually happened. And then in the third chapter of the book, we take you through the CONCON and the 2004, 2005, and then up to January 2nd, 2007, when the legislature voted to send this ballot, the constitutional amendment, to the ballot. And in the fourth chapter, what we celebrate, and this was Beacon Press's idea, and I really want to thank them for that. We celebrate families and marriages, and really show what our lives are like, what the wonderful benefits are that we got from marriage, and what the problems are, what the obstacles are that our families face in not having marriage as a legal right. And we hope that we'll be able to hold on to that. So I want to just have Karen read one small part of the book, the part about Cambridge on the night of May 16th, 2004, a short passage there. I mean, I don't know about you in global warming. I'm a big environmentalist. That's another one of my passions. But I was out there on May 16th, 2004, and I had a ski jacket on, I had a neck warmer, and I had gloves, and I needed them all. It was just amazing. So the weather on May 16th in Cambridge is highly unpredictable. So, Karen, if I can ask you to just read a little bit of that.
Thank you. Before I read this passage, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming, for all your incredible support, and thank you to Marilyn and Pat. This was an incredibly collaborative project. It was wonderful to work on. Pat and I got married in the process, which was a really great thing. And I want to thank my colleagues at PHI and my family who's here tonight, and I want to acknowledge that my mother would have really loved to have been here, and she passed away just a few weeks ago, and that was very hard for all of us. So this would have been the event of her life. She would have loved all these people here supporting us. She supported us as a family and a couple, and I just wanted to acknowledge that tonight. So thank you. This is a passage in the book that takes us back exactly 3 years ago to this very city, and it's just quite short, so bear with me. Susan Shepard and Marcia Hams, a couple of 27 years, proved to the world that wanting to have the first legal same-sex marriage license in the country meant that you do the extraordinary. Cambridge, a city well known for its progressive politics, would be the first municipality to open for business at 12:01 a.m. on Monday, May 17th. Susan secured the first place in line at Cambridge City Hall, and on Saturday, May 15th, the longtime Cambridge residents tucked into sleeping bags under their big tarp close to the front door. It was a rainy night then, too. The couple, along with their 24-year-old son, Peter, is wild about sports, and so this made sense to Marcia. If people can do this for Red Sox tickets, we can certainly do it for our lives. On Sunday, more couples arrived to get in line. A family festival took shape on the sloping lawn of City Hall. Dogs and kids cavorted, frisbees flew, handstands and somersaults wowed the gathering crowds. Kids and adults played catch, couples held hands and shared their wedding plans. Every once in a while, people would pinch themselves, wondering if the bliss would last, if they'd really get marriage licenses, if there would really be a wedding for them. The countdown to the first second of May 17th began inside and outside the building, and the city block rocked with cheers at 12:01 a.m. Within the hour, the first couples emerged, waving their completed white application cards to the wild applause of thousands. Reporters and TV crews pressed in. Well-wishers handed the couples roses, threw confetti and rice, and kept up spirited rounds of going to the chapel, God Bless America, and America the Beautiful. Shepard, clutching the first fully legal U.S. marriage license application for a gay couple, told a reporter, "This is like winning the World Series and the Stanley Cup on the same day." I'm trying not to lose it. We just really feel awesome. It's awesome. Her partner, Hams, thinking of their son, Peter, an NCAA hockey star, looked into a TV camera and said, "There's a kid somewhere that's watching this. It's going to change his whole life." While Shepard and Hams had planned to be at Cambridge City Hall, Ralph Hogden and Paul McMahon, who had been together for almost 49 years, did not have marriage at the top of their agenda. That all changed, though, on Sunday, May 16th, just after 11 p.m. As they watched the 11 o'clock news, they saw the huge crowds and exuberant party building at Cambridge City Hall. That was it. They rushed out, took the subway to the festivities just to be supportive. Once at City Hall, they got so swept up in the spirit, McMahon recalls, "We got there and the excitement was so wonderful, it was so positive, and people were so supportive. Next thing you know, we're in line." By the close of business on May 17th, Cambridge topped the state in marriage applications, taking in 268 and then issuing licenses to couples who obtained court waivers on the usual 3-day waiting period. Few failed to notice the incredible generosity of city workers, ranging from the superintendent of schools to the chief public health officer to the city clerk's staff who volunteered to stay up all night, ushering in this historic era of marriage equality. Cambridge was also the site of the first marriage when shortly after 9 a.m., City Clerk Margaret Drury married a couple that had been together for 18 years. Tanya McCluskey and Marcia Kaddish promised each other, "My friendship, my support, my love." Media from around the world captured the moment. The two women, who up until then had led largely private lives, found themselves coming out to an international audience as a married couple. McCluskey, lost for words, choked out, "I'm so happy right now. This is a dream come true. To stand in front of all these people makes us nervous but proud." Kaddish agreed, "I'm glowing from the inside. Happy is an understatement."
another person who's here tonight who we really can't talk about the history of the movement for equality in Massachusetts without mentioning, and that is Arlene Isaacson, the Mass Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus. Thank you, Arlene. Our next to the last speaker is going to be, our last two speakers are people from the State House, the people who we have elected to represent us and who have done such an extraordinary job of doing so on so many issues related to civil rights and civil liberties. But very few do it with the courage and the passion of Senator Jarrett Berrios.
Okay, Pat, lower the thing here. All right. Good evening. I was watching with great interest the Cambridge City Hall party slides. I was one of the many folks there that evening. I'm not sure if any of you were at the party, but you may recall there was this big rush in to everybody get their licenses, and then there was a rush out to see people coming out, who the first person was going to be to come down the stairs. And in all the hubbub to see who the first person was, I grabbed my partner Doug's hand, and we ran out, and they said, well, you should go around the back. And I said, well, no, I know that guard in the front. He'll let us go out the front. And so we walked out. This is right before Marcia and Susan grabbed and walked out because we wanted to see them. And so we grabbed each other's hands, and we walked out, and then we got pelted with rice and flowers. And I had to start explaining that, no, we didn't just get married. We're just here to see, we're here to see the first couple. It was a memorable event, I have to say. There were about 500 television cameras that we had to explain that to. That was a really interesting moment. For any of us present in Cambridge that evening, or for anyone who has attended a friend or a family member's wedding, I don't think that words capture, the pictures begin to capture the emotional content. Mary Bonato refers to it as being fully equal, as being part of the we in we the people. And I suppose for any lesbian or gay person who has married in Massachusetts, we'll always feel that very special sense beyond what it means to be married, that to be married in Massachusetts, to be the first state, to be finally fully equal in every sense of the word is remarkable. And we're not there yet. I wish this were a coda, but this is really just an intermission. We haven't fully won marriage equality. We, like you, believe that in the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens who may come out to vote someday, that we would win that. And yet, we also know, or we should know, that it is wrong to put civil rights on the ballot. It would be wrong for you or for me to have to explain our marriage, explain to our neighbors, ask for permission somehow to continue receiving this right, which our Supreme Judicial Court has ruled to be fundamental. And we aren't there yet. We have one more constitutional convention on June 14th. We have one final effort. We have a few more votes that we must push across the finish line. I do believe we will win, but we won't win if we sit down and just celebrate a beautiful book. This book isn't just beautiful for its pictures. It isn't just an opportunity to nostalgize. It is a call to action. And we've recognized that And you all applauded when Mary Bonato referenced that we're going national. But we got to take care of Massachusetts first. We've got a wonderful, wonderful tradition we have begun in our Commonwealth. But let us secure it once and for all. And we need each of you to continue supporting wonderful organizations that stand up for our equality, like the ACLU. And I'm so delighted that Carol is here and you are hosting this event tonight for the gang here. Karen and Kat and Marilyn. And that the ACLU has worked hand in hand with our best partners in the State House for equality. Mark Solomon is here, the executive director. Thank you, Mass Equality. We appreciate all that you do. And she has been recognized already. And she was the first activist, I suppose, when I used to work for the Boston City Council. We were trying to pass something that we thought was progressive and forward-looking at the time with our domestic partnership ordinance. But Arlene Isaacson was in the room then, and she's in the room now. And Arlene's organization, the Massachusetts Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, is always present. Mass Equality is present. The ACLU is present. Religious Coalition for Freedom to Marry is present. All of these organizations who continue to battle our fight and continue to need your support to do that. Until we kill this amendment once and for all, we have to stay focused on what is happening in our own backyard. Please celebrate tonight and remember, rededicate ourselves tomorrow. And until June 14th comes, until the day comes that this is finally dead, this effort to put discrimination into our Constitution, we must keep fighting. Thank you all very much.
By the way, Jared, I love that picture of you with the fist up there. It was really good. I'd like to thank Representative Liz Malia, who's here tonight, for being with us, not only tonight, but throughout this battle. Thank you. And our final speaker, before we break for wedding cake, our final speaker tonight is a man who leads us and who inspires us. He happens to be on the board of the ACLU of Massachusetts, I'm very proud to say. But more than that, he leads us in every fight and every battle and knits together the fact that this struggle for equality is linked to all of the other struggles for equality that we have had throughout our history, and that the road we're on is really a road to freedom for all of us, and as Mary says, for we the people. Please join me in welcoming Representative Byron Rushing.
Pat, Karen, Marilyn, thank you. Just fantastic. Thank you. Right? And I would even say that if I wasn't in the boat. It is so good to be with you this evening. But I cannot leave you this evening without reminding you who you are. You are some of the most radical people in the world. There's this wonderful story about the first time that Zhou Enlai met Henry Kissinger. How many people here know who Zhou Enlai was? I have just separated you by age. And they weren't supposed to meet, and they find themselves in the same room. Zhou Enlai was the premier of what we then called Red China. And he has to make some small talk. And so Henry Kissinger has to make some small talk with Zhou Enlai. And so they're in Paris, I think, and Henry Kissinger says to Zhou Enlai, well, what do you think are the major implications of the French Revolution? And Zhou Enlai replies, it's too soon to tell. Now let me tell you, you and I are trying to make this experiment of democracy work. You and I are trying to make sure that this experiment of democracy will work. And so you are radical because there are so many people who do not believe that everybody has basic human rights. Just remember, there is nothing unique about democracy. Every society has some people who got to vote. In Rome, there are a few people who got to vote. There were always, in every society, a few people who got to vote. The radical idea is that everyone should get to vote. The radical idea is that every person has human rights. That is the radical idea. The radical idea is no matter who that human being is, that human being has the right to liberty, the right to opportunity, the right to deep in themselves find themselves and say, this is who I am, like it. Everybody. And we know those wonderful documents that say things like, all men are created equal, we the people. And the fascinating thing about that idea is that the important power in that idea is not in the telling of that idea, it is in the hearing of that idea. The power comes when we hear that idea and say, it applies to me too. And we have been experimenting in this society for the past 250 years in hearing those words and responding to those words. It doesn't matter to me that Jefferson had slaves and had a few that were really special to him. What matters to me is that my ancestors heard those words and said, we are in those words, and we will be free. What matters to me is that women hear those words and say, we will be liberated. What matters to me is that the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community hears those words and says, we are in the we. Period. Now, two remarkable things happened 3 years ago. The first remarkable thing that happened is the one that I predicted. Some of people here were around when I made that prediction. It was the prediction I made the night before the great event in Cambridge City Hall, and that prediction was, the sun will rise and the milk will not curdle. And the other remarkable thing that happened was that we were able to have an experience with civil rights that almost no one else had had in this country. And that experience was that when the declaration was made that these rights were available to everyone, and everyone could get married regardless of the sex of the person they wanted to marry, that went into effect right here. That did not happen in any other civil rights struggle in this country. It would have been like in Brown if all the schools in America would have been integrated for 3 years from then on. And then we'll say, well, what really happened? And everybody will say, hey, it's not so bad. And that, of course, is why this drives some people crazy. Why people are going crazy about Massachusetts is that they cannot make up any stories about what would happen. What would happen if these people get married? They can't make up any stories. And of course, as Mary said, they want to uproot this. Of course. There is no surprise. We're not surprised. If there was no opposition to this, it would have happened 250 years ago. We are not surprised. But we do know what fantastic responsibility this places on all of us radicals celebrating throughout this state and throughout this country for us tonight. We have come an incredible far way. Representative Wilf gave you some of those statistics. We have heard from Mary the number of states that now have civil unions. You know, if Mary and I had known that we could get civil unions in all those states just by having marriage, we would have proposed marriage about 20 years ago. Right? What a great tactic to get civil unions. Right? I walked up to the State House the day after Goodrich, and people who had been telling us that the world would end with civil unions were born again. There he was, for born again civil union night. Our struggle now is to make this permanent. And we must know, as radicals, that we are making this permanent not for ourselves, but for everyone. For everyone. It is so, so important to make this permanent. Now, we are peculiar in Massachusetts, and it's because of our peculiarity of our Constitution when it comes to amending the Constitution that we're in this situation. Imagine this. Out of 200 people, out of 200 legislators, over 140 support same-sex marriage. Is that a slight majority? No, that's a big majority. But nevertheless, because of our particular way that we have in amending the Constitution, that is not enough. So this is the other reason why we drive our opponents crazy. Because when we win, we will have won with 75% plus one. 75% plus one. No one will be able to say that the state of Massachusetts and its government does not support same-sex marriage when we get that 75% plus one. I know it seems like a long, long time that we have struggled to get where we are. I know that you've been asked to do a lot of things in order to get where we are. I know that there's some people in the back of this room who asked you for a lot of money to help us get to where we are. The only response that we can have to that is to do more. That is the only response that we can have for coming so close to where we are, is to do more. And so I call on all of you, to understand what you are a part of, what you are a part of. This would not have been possible if African Americans had not struggled to end their slavery. It would not be possible if women had not struggled for their liberation. It would not have been possible if all of the civil rights struggles that have gone on in this country had not occurred. And none of them was easy. None of them was easy. Because it is in our minds, our hearts, our hands and feet and wallets, that resides the center of our victory. And together, we in Massachusetts will be able to say, in this state, we have 75% plus one.